We think developed nations should allow high net worth individuals to jump the line and purchase citizenship through citizenship or investment programs. We describe that this will benefit everyone involved from an economic perspective, which is philosophically grounded, and is politically feasible in the long and short term. All right, so from an economic perspective, we think that this is pretty much an unmitigated boom. People who are coming here through citizenship by investment programs are going to be high net worth individuals. They're going to have a lot of money, and they're going to take some of that money and spend it on workers, on capital in this country. That's going to be good for them. They're choosing to move to here, so they're going to have access to this free market. For American workers, this is going to be good. For Americans in general, this is going to be good economically, because the money that they bring will allow American workers to have more capital and use that to work more productively. We think this is pretty clear. It's also going to generate more tax revenue because there's more wealthy people in the country. They'll be taxed more. They'll be net contributors to the tax program. This will be good for the government, which will allow the government to run more effectively and more effectively run the economy.
Yeah, so for the philosophical justification, we propose a utilitarian argument. So we believe that all involved will benefit. Charlie outlined how the immigrants themselves would benefit, as well as the economy and social programs. There may be some short-term cons, such as social outrage, but we believe that these will be heavily outweighed. Additionally, we propose that as part of the investment program, there's a threshold. So it would be a very small percent of individuals that could participate. So in terms of effects on culture, there would be little impact as it's a small number of individuals. And it would also not be immoral to those with less money because it is a very select group that could participate.
And then looking politically, we were looking at the short term. So kind of just looking at the current administration, the golden ticket that has been proposed for immigrants who are willing to spend more money in this country. And so we kind of see this proposal as a different version of the golden ticket. So it would be politically feasible in a 4-year term. Just due to the group of people that would be coming in, there aren't a large quantity, so it wouldn't drastically change political views or the voting process. And then, like Jen mentioned, there would be maybe some social or political outrage. However, we see this as pretty minor, and we don't see people taking their views out politically on this. And then we also see immigrants' children. So these immigrants, they'll have kids who will use these social programs, go to school, and they will eventually assimilate into American culture and then vote accordingly. In the long term, we see better developed social programs due to immigrants' taxes, so more people are happy with the economy as well as the government. And so we see a betterment of education and more people voting in support of the free market with where these taxes are going and how these programs are impacting the American people.
Right.
And so that is all we have.
Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any questions?
So I think you've done a good job outlining who benefits from this policy.
Sure.
It seems like you were saying that everybody benefits. So I'm wondering if you think there's anybody who could be a net loser on this policy, and if so, how does that factor into your calculation?
I can take this.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
So obviously we see the American people who are already citizens of the U.S. as benefactors, and then we see these wealthy immigrants that are coming in and essentially jumping the line as benefactors. The people who would essentially be losing out on this are people who are still currently in the line or who cannot afford to jump it. However, as we were talking about this, we kind of see the people waiting in line as people who are looking forward to coming into this country, and eventually if the immigrants who are jumping the line are making it better for those waiting in line, the country will just be in a better place once they are finally given citizenship. So we see this as a very long-term benefit to these net losers, but still a benefit in the end.
I also wanted to say, this is probably going to be a different program than the green card program. So it's not necessarily those people aren't necessarily losing out because it's in addition to whatever programs are currently existing is this program. So it's not even necessarily we're kicking somebody out, or we're not allowing somebody in based on allowing somebody in through this program.
Yeah, and then just to add, we were talking about the idea of like this threshold so that it's only about this 1%. So that way it's not this huge influx of people jumping the line, but rather a few select individuals so that those who are in line don't feel like 30 people just cut in front of them, but maybe one or two.
So you had mentioned that there could be some social outreach, and I was wondering where that would come from and why.
Yes, so in terms of social outreach, one thing that we were talking about that could be reflected through political things would be voting patterns. So people could eventually see this as unfair and then try to vote for more open border policies. But we believe that if they did this, then because this program is in addition to already having closed borders, that if we open the border, or if we had more open policies, then this policy would kind of become irrelevant because it would just be open for everyone.
Yeah, I think, okay, go ahead. I think maybe we also wanted to say, again, this is not very many people, so I think people might be outraged by this. Like you're letting people cut the line. This is not fair to, the rest of the world. I can't see that being a very big deal based on the scale of this proposal. It's just not that many people. It's not that many people, so I do not believe it. We don't believe it would be that big a deal.
And I think in the short term, it might cause outrage, like news stories are putting this out, people are initially shocked or potentially devastated, but then, news stories come out all the time, and politics are constantly changing, so I feel like people would easily forget about this if there's not a mass immigration of these types of people coming to the US.
If you are politically libertarian as I am, you try to live and vote by the non-aggression principle, self-ownership, consent. How is the proposal you are backing consistent or not with this kind of philosophical approach?
We think it's moving in the direction of consistency. Obviously this is not something that is just universally freedom. In order for this program to even make sense, you have to have closed borders, which is a restriction on these personal freedoms. However, I think it's moving in that direction. Closed borders are a barrier to personal freedom. And this is lifting one element of that restriction. So we think it's pretty consistent with a libertarian point of view.
Okay, what was the scale again? How many? You mentioned it wouldn't be that many.
Right. Right. So I think a proposal might be, if you want to come to the United States, you have to invest $1 million in America. I don't know off the top of my head how many millionaires in the world there are, but it's not so many. It's not a whole lot. I think we'd imagine the scale of this would be less than 10,000 people a year. My guess would be much less, but again, I don't know enough to speculate too much.
So if it's a good idea at 10,000, would it be a better idea at 10 million? Like, is there a limit to it where it would cease being a good idea?
10 million, okay.
I think that
10 million people.
Yeah, I think that there could be a limit just with what we were talking about in some of the earlier questions, where if you start increasing it, then the people who don't have that money would then get very outraged. And I guess if you made it to a certain point where maybe you said like 90% of people applying for immigration, it ended up that they could all come in, so then you have this 10%. Perhaps the outrage of the 10% could feel outweighed, but it would, from a philosophical perspective, I think then it would be immoral to those that would not be able to account for it.
And the other thing maybe is that any program that's really described by this citizenship through investment, I think all the serious policy proposals are such that they would limit they would limit the immigration to relatively small numbers. So I think it's almost a different question if you start asking
So
about.
you think it's more, the overall limit's the same, but it's what percentage of that can buy this?
Right.
Yeah, okay.